I think the reason that I ended up pursuing this topic and doing the research for it and ultimately culminating in this book was no matter where I would go, like in my personal life and the research I was doing in companies and the students that I'm seeing in my classrooms, everybody tells the same story. I and it's a descriptive story, and it goes something like this. I love whatever, TikTok. I love, Excel. I love ChatGPT. Okay, I don't care what it is. And it's doing all these great things for me. But man, if I have to hear one more time about this new tool that my company is making me try, and I got so many messages, and I'm constantly disrupted, and I just find myself scrolling and clicking, and I just feel like I don't want to send another DM on Slack, but but I need to, and I feel like I should not look at my screen, but I'm drawn to it like a tractor beam. Like people tell these same stories over and over again. So I would often just say, well, why don't you stop? There's people say digital detox, just like stop for a couple days. And then most people would just laugh and say, I can't stop because what? I'm going to tell my boss, sorry, I'm not going to answer emails, or I'm going to tell my friends, sorry, you wanted to coordinate this nice dinner out and I'm just not going to respond to any of your texts. Like it's just not realistic. And I wish I had better strategies for how to shape my interaction with these technologies so that I don't have this feeling of burnout and exhaustion. So for me, that was the big driver of wanting to do this book because I've been hearing this in some way, shape, or form since the early 2000s when I started doing research with people using technology. And it got worse at two key points. One was around 2010. And 2010 was when we all now had this amazing device called an iPhone or, Samsung Galaxy or whatever in our pockets, and we could access like all the world's content immediately. And also importantly, it was when, Facebook, reached 100 million, daily active users. And so like everybody was on these devices, like 2010 timeframe. So that's the first time I see this jump happen in people's levels of exhaustion. And then the second, not surprisingly, is COVID, when we're all transitioning from we had face-to-face meetings and now we're on Zoom, and then we used to hang out with friends and now we got our wine and we're looking over Google Meetup or whatever. So people just these two jumps in these feelings of exhaustion. And I said, okay, I've been looking at this in some way for the last 2 decades. Now's the time to go back and figure out, well, what are the real causes of this? Because I don't believe that Zoom is the problem. I don't believe that ChatGPT is the problem. These tools solve many problems and they do great things for us. The problem has got to be something deeper. So that's the first place I went in the book is trying to identify what are the root causes, what I call the drivers of exhaustion. And those are all about kind of three key things. The first is how we pay attention. And the second is the kind of inferences that we make based on the partial data that comes to us through all of these tools. And the last is our emotions, how the use of our different digital tools pique our emotions and in positive and negative ways that result in us being very emotionally and physically worn out. So if you can understand that these are the drivers, then you can start to say, well, what are good solutions that are backed by evidence about how we can overcome these? And my challenge then was taking, a bunch of sort of scattered academic studies that focus on, really specific things like, does it make a difference to turn off your Twitter notifications on your phone? To take a bunch of these and say, how do they add up to bigger patterns of ways that we can orient to our devices? And so the book is organized in terms of what I call 8 simple rules that you can use. And I kind of think of it as almost a choose your own adventure situation, where you've got every one of us experiences digital exhaustion differently. And so for some of us, some of these rules are going to be more effective. And for others, a different combination of them might be more effective. And so you kind of got to figure out which are the ones that work best for you. And there's a nice little appendix in the back of the book to help you figure that out. So the first one that I really love that I use all the time is rule number 2, and it's called make a match. I think that's rule number 2. It might be rule number 3. I don't know. It's one of those two. It's make a match. And here's the general idea. Different tools are really good at doing different kinds of things. And what we often do is revert to using one particular tool because it seems like it would be easier, or there's a culture around this is the tool we use, rather than it actually being the best tool for the job. And we want to make a match between the capabilities of the tool and what I'm actually trying to accomplish. And when we make that match, our exhaustion levels go way down. So, concrete example. Um, I, like many people, send lots of emails every day. And it's really easy to send an email because it's asynchronous and I can just fire it right off and I can get a response, usually relatively quickly. But what often happens is we have a complex problem that I need to sort out. You and I, Jake, we need to talk about it. We need to work through it. You need to respond to what I'm saying. I need to pick up on, are you upset about this? Are we vibing on this, right? Do we really agree? And that's super hard to do via email. And so what ends up happening is I send an email, you read it, you make an attribution about, oh, Paul seems to want to do this, or Paul's upset about this. And then you respond, and I have to respond to clarify. And then, right, we end up in this kind of back and forth, and it's easy to make bad inferences, and it escalates the responses that I need. And then I get anxious because, oh, now we have some conflict. Where if I just walked down the hall to talk to you or picked up the phone, we probably could have just hammered this out in like 5 minutes. But we do this all the time. And it's not just email. We do it on social media. We do it in different work contexts. We do it with our family and friends. And so we really want to just be more thoughtful about what am I trying to accomplish? If this is a really collaborative kind of activity that's going to require a lot of back and forth, I need to pick the right tool that's going to help me do that. And if it's not, if it's something where I just need a quick answer and maybe it's not even immediate, but I just need a quick, here's how to do this, then great. I pick a technology like email that'll allow me to do that. So we just want to be really conscious about matching the things that I'm trying to accomplish with the capabilities of the tools. Now, that sounds simple, right? You're like, well, no, no, duh, Paul. Like, you do need to write a book about that. The hard part is, how do you actually stop and implement that, right? How do you stop to think about it? And so that's what I try to discuss if you read through that, right? Is like, what are the key points that will trigger you to say, this is a place where I need to stop it and slow down. Um, Another one that I like that's proving to be quite controversial when I talk about it is the idea of waiting. And this is about our response patterns to other people. So we tend to respond very quickly when people respond to us or think that we need to respond very quickly. And there's a lot of interesting, research out there that shows that people generally don't perceive their request to be as high priority as we perceive their request to be. So we fall into this trap of thinking that, oh, I need to respond right away. And again, what the research shows us pretty conclusively is that we entrain on other people's response patterns. So if you send me an email, or let's say you send me a message in Slack, or you send me, a comment, you like my post on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever it is, and then I respond really quickly, then you tend to respond quickly the next time I do it. And we're in this arms race to respond really quickly to each other because we just entrain on each other's patterns. But the more volume that I have, the more stuff I got to suffer through, and the more interpretations I have to make, and the more exhausted I feel because I'm switching between trying to work on this report or hanging out with my kids, and then I'm responding to this text. So if we just slow it all down and we take a beat before we respond, we actually reduce the volume of things that people send us, and we get to a cadence that's much more manageable. And it turns out that most of the people that I've interviewed and the research that I looked at for the book hardly noticed the difference. And if it's really time sensitive, usually they tell us. Or if we're going to take a really long time to reply, usually we can just say to them, hey, I'm going to take a couple days and I'll respond to this. Also, what the research shows, which is kind of cool, I think, is that, and something that I've felt over the years, is that if you take a little more time to be thoughtful in responding to somebody, let's say, you get an email, just as an example, and I really kind of think through it, and rather than shoot off, yeah, here, or check out this link or whatever, and I give them a more thoughtful response, the likelihood of them sending me a message back for clarification reduces by almost like 3 times. And because now they've got this wealth of information that can sort of sit there and they can go back to it and they can look at it and they don't need to keep bothering us again and again. And then we get fewer interruptions and then we're less exhausted and it becomes a virtuous cycle. So waiting is really cool. And honestly, a lot of problems just get resolved by themselves if you wait just a minute. Like if you wait a day and someone's like, "Hey, this is an urgent problem," and it doesn't really look that urgent to you, 5 minutes later they might send you an email. Okay, I got it all figured out, right? Because the easiest thing to do is go bug somebody rather than try to figure it out ourselves.